testing.
But you know, I remember cooking them on the grill.
Okay.
Yeah,
Now,
like we used to like normal.
Oh, wait.
Like one steak per
It's just the
person.
invite though.
Now it's like parents are kind of trying to cut back on.
Sure.
Kind of diet and all that.
Yeah.
And so it's like we split like a steak from
Right there we go.
one steak like fill up my whole plate. No, I can't eat it either. And like there's almost over, I'm still like working on a steak and I'm together we thought we were gonna eat more of this stuff. I had to clear out food. Let me grab it now. Yeah.
Is it possible?
Yeah, we like to grill a lot. Yeah. Even during the winter time.
That's
They show up like a 5-foot big square, just so they can walk out and cook them in another big patty.
what's in the winter, it's really hard to keep it going. Because as soon as you open it, it gets really cold. It's just hard to cook that way.
If they're gonna pay, you gotta split it.
Exactly.
Is there
The one year we
like
actually,
or something else I should use?
the one year I think we moved like their grill, but we have a smoker. I think it was a smoker, we put it out in our garage, like in our driveway.
I mean, we need to
Someone
be
walking
like as a person.
It's like beginning of the summer or something. You go out that time of the year, and like, we've been cooking all year, we just decide to get some.
Might have to save it for another time.
Yeah, that's fine. We can test that later.
You can see that working in the winter because, you know, you're not really opening it up.
Yeah.
I think I have something here.
And then let's see.
Homepage, YouTube.
I'm just thinking how
Web. Oh, here, what's this?
That's a good drink.
Alright, one last thing. Can you try that one that I just sent you?
Just send it out.
This doesn't work. Oh, this looks good.
It's promising.
Accept you.
Any seconds. All right.
You can just click on it. You're locked? Yeah, we're just getting it. The plugin wasn't installing.
Alright, cool.
Did you have any announcements?
No, there's this weekend, so there's that.
Yep.
Cool, thanks.
Yep. All right. Today we have Alicia talking about different title than this. SoapUI open source for API functional testing. Not really any announcements this week besides Rendezvous this weekend. So yeah, hope to see everybody there. You can go ahead and pick it up.
All right, guys. Hey, how's it going? So my talk is obviously on using SoapUI to do API functional testing. What this is really about is using SoapUI as a tool to automate your API testing. So we're going to touch on some of the features, but this is really like an intro level thing to SoapUI. So if you guys have any questions about like deeper features or anything like that, just let me know. There's going to be some time to go over that kind of stuff at the end. All right, so the first thing, what is SoapUI? It's an open source automated API testing tool. It's primarily for functional testing. It has some simple loaded security test features built in, but really what it's been known for over the past like 10 years or so is functional testing of APIs. There is a premium version called SoapUI NG Pro. It's packaged as part of this Ready API platform. It's an end-to-end back-end testing platform. The license is about $1,000, so it's a pretty low-cost tool if you want to upgrade and get some of the cooler features. But the open source version, if you're just looking for something that's quick and easy and free and something you can pick up in like an hour and do a proof of concept and maybe sell one of your clients on the idea of investing in SoapUI, you can do that. It's super easy. Contrary to the name, it supports both SOAP and REST APIs. It also tests pretty much any kind of messaging protocol that you can imagine. There's a Java database driver. There's, I think, an AMQ test component. Just straight up plain HTTPS requests. Anything that is a kind of request response paradigm, it can test. So why should you use SoapUI? It's great if you have an API that's consumed by many different platforms. The value of API testing kind of falls away if all you've got is just a straight web app that is consumed by a web front end, and then you've got your back end. That's not really useful because you're really only getting traffic through your API from one direction, or from one source to another source. It's great though if you're working on an application where you have an Android app, a web app, and you have lots of different sources, or if you have a publicly facing API that other vendors or businesses are consuming, it's really great for that. It's also, like I mentioned, it's easy to use, it's free, so it's really easy to impress people with it. It's high impact, low cost, low effort. The really cool thing now that Swagger is becoming kind of really popular, it comes with a Swagger plugin packaged with the free version that allows you not only to import Swagger definitions and automatically generate a test case from that, but it also allows you to generate Swagger definitions if you have an established SoapUI battery of test cases. The user community, I really love the SoapUI user community. I've been part of it for about 5 years. Anytime I've had a question, I go to one of the SmartBear forums and somebody jumps on it right away. If it's not a SmartBear person, it's somebody who's actively using the tool. I've never not had a question answered, right? These are just incredibly helpful, friendly people. And the other thing too is that it can, like I kind of mentioned earlier, it can provide a little bit of coverage on security and load tests. If you're going to be doing security testing, I think Burp Suite is probably a better tool because for this you have to actually write your SQL injections and cross-site scripting requests and that sort of thing. But it's there if you want to do, again, some quick proof of concept kind of stuff around security testing. It has some basic load testing built in as well. Again, I think there are other tools that are probably better for doing robust load testing, but if what you need to do is something quick and dirty, you can do it in SoapUI. It also allows for quicker bug discovery, because if you can test something at the API level and then test it at the front end level, you can tell if it's broken at the API level or the front end level, or the other way if it's broken on the database or back end side of things. It's also cross-platform. There are Linux, OS 10, Windows installers, 32, 64-bit, so pretty much any operating system you're running, there's a native version for it. When you go grab it, make sure you get it from SmartBear. There are lots of places that you can grab it from. If you want to make sure that you get what's supported by SmartBear, make sure that you get it from SmartBear. You have a couple of different options when you're running through installation. I highly, highly recommend installing Hermes JMS and also the sample tests that come with it. The sample tests that come with it, there's like a SOAP protocol, there's some REST stuff, so it's got some really good stuff that you can kind of poke around and see how a really nice repository of API test cases is set up. So, kind of told you about this stuff, so now it's time for us to do the demo and show you what this can actually do. So I'm going to go ahead and cruise on over to my SoapUI installation. I grabbed this again, this is the open source version. And I'm just going to walk you through how you can quickly create a project based on Google Maps API. There's a couple of different endpoints that we're going to test. And I'm going to show you how you can generate, just basics on how you can generate a load test and security test as well. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a new REST project. I went with REST because I think most places are developing RESTful APIs now. I haven't seen anybody developing a SoapUI. There's some still out there, but REST seems to be popular. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to provide it with a URI, of what I want to test. The first thing I'm going to test is the geocode service for Google Maps. So I just put the URI in here. Now if you notice, I use format in curly braces. So when you actually make this call, you can send it to format. It supports XML, it supports JSON. There are a couple of other protocols that Google Maps supports. But if you do format this way, you're not tied to the format of the request and response. You can change it on the fly because it becomes a variable. If you have a waddle, somehow, like I haven't really seen a lot of people that have predefined waddles for REST services, but hey, if you have that, you can just throw it there and it'll make your life a lot easier. So basically what it did was it created my new project, which I'm going to rename to something sensible. Because this kind of acts as a test case management tool as well, there's a lot of areas for descriptions and stuff like that. I think it's in your best interest to use super descriptive names and stuff like that. That way you don't have to tie it back to some kind of test case management tool where you go, oh yeah, I'm testing this thing with this test. So I'm just going to name this brown bag demo. All right. And then I'm going to expand. These are not the tests. This is basically a sandbox for me to muck around with this API service and see what I can do with it, make sure that it's laid out correctly before I start my tests. So the way that this hierarchy works is this is the project. Below the project, you have the service. Below the service, you have the resource. Below the resource, you have the method, which is, you can see get right here. And then below that, you actually have the request. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this. The service is, oh, that's right, I have to rename it down here. For some reason, and this is one of the weird things with the free version, it's buggy, right? So I have to update the name here instead of, there's not an F2 option to rename it at that level for some reason. So that is, I'm just going to say geocoding. All right. This is the resource, so we'll just rename this. Geocoding resource, and you can see the resource URI right there. I'm going to rename this to get, because we're doing a get. And I'm going to rename this to something sensible like get Slalom Chicago address. All right. So this is important that you name things at this level because this is used to generate your test names. All right. So we've got all that done. I've got you can see that I've put in the address right here as a parameter. One of the things that I love about SoapUI is that it allows you to create variables for stuff like this in the front end. And so what I can do is I can, since I know that I'm going to be using Slalom Chicago's address in every single one of these requests, and because I know that addresses change, and I don't want to have to go back, and if I generate 30 tests, I don't want to have to go back and edit 30 fields with a new address, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to custom properties for the project. And I'm going to add a property for the project. What this means is that this entire project can now use this property. If I were to add the property to just the GET request, it would only be accessible for everything below that. But this way, I can make sure it's available to anybody in the project. So I'm going to write Slalom Chai address. It's 180 North Stetson, Chicago, IL. Right? So that's there. So then what I can do is I can update this so that it is, I've got to copy and paste it. Right, so what this does is this pulls this address from the project now. So that way, if I want to create 20 requests off of this, I can, and then I only have to update it in one place, and then I don't even have to rebuild the project or anything. I can just rerun the test and it grabs it right away. So I'm going to test this out to see if this works the way I expect it to. And we have a problem. Let's see.
in here, format it in. Still just format.
Oh yeah, thank you. Format needs to be JSON or XML. So I can do that. Since it's a JSON, thank you. I can view the response in JSON. I can't view it in XML, obviously, because I requested JSON. You can also view the raw response here if you want. But this is good because this allows me to see what the request and what the response looks like, and make sure that everything is kosher before I start generating both happy path test cases and error path test cases. Another thing that I want to draw attention to here is that you can do auth. These are open public endpoints, so I'm not doing auth, but SoapUI supports pretty much every type of auth that you can imagine, including OAuth. You can also, if there are request headers that you need to add, you can do that here as well. So anyway, I've got this geocoding endpoint set up. I also have another one that I want to set up. So I'm going to, let's see. New REST service from URI. Again, this one I'm going to use the directions endpoint. And this one I'm going to get directions from the red line to Chicago Salon offices. So again, same thing, copy and paste. If you look back here, it should have format. I did not replace that. So it's got JSON there. So you just put format there. Okay. Close this one out so you don't get confused. Same thing, right? So I'm going to update the format to JSON. The origin is going to stay the same. If I wanted to, I could create a variable for the origin so that I can change that on the fly. So instead I'm going to do project. So that's how I tell what level it's at. It's a project level variable. We're just going to fire this response off. Zero results. It's not what I was supposed to do. Let's see. Let's try 180 north. 180 north. All right. Open this back up. I copy and paste. That somehow. There we go. So I got the same response that time. All right, so now that we're sure that we've got a couple of nice happy path requests and responses, now comes the part where I'm going to generate the tests. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with geocoding. I am going to, I'm sorry, start with this. So we're going to go ahead and there should be a generate test case. Generate test suite. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to generate a test suite. If I had, 3 or 4 endpoints under here, it would generate 3 or 4 test cases. I only have one. I don't have any existing test suites, so it's going to create a new one for me. I personally like to do a single test case for each resource. I find it makes it really readable. If you have something really, really huge, you might want to do a single test case with one request for each method. It really depends on what you're doing. But it doesn't really matter because it's really just how you organize your work. It can all be accessed by other requests and responses as needed. I'm also going to generate a load test here. I can do that on the fly just to show you guys what it looks like, even though I can't run load tests. So, super descriptive name, geocoding test suite. That way I know it goes to the geocoding endpoint. Here's the test suite that was generated. Now this doesn't look like anything, but this is where you can run the test from. Now, if I expand this over here, This is the test suite, this is the test case, and these are the test steps, right? I'll just go make a diversion really quickly into load testing. This is what load testing looks like. You can, adjust the time for however long you want it to be. You can adjust the number of threads. I can't do it because Google's API is rate limited. I don't have access to an unrate limited API, but if you wanted to do some load testing, you could do it like that. Security tests as well, just so you guys get an idea of what it looks like. You can see here that you can add a security test scan, so you can do boundary scans, you can do fuzzing, you can do SQL injections, you can do XPath injections, cross-site scripting, that sort of stuff. So all of the OAuth top 10 threats, I think, can be covered in there. We're not going to do that. So right now, I'm going to open up this test step. Test step is a request. So this is a really, really simple thing where I'm just basically getting an address. Maybe your test case is for some kind of online purchasing system, in which case you might have a test step that adds items to the cart, and then you might have one that goes through the preview your cart process, then payment process, then a success one. So this is only one test step, but it's pretty easy to see how you could come up with many, many test steps, right? So if you could see, it also grabbed the variable that I specified in that original one. That's why I specified it at this level, instead of waiting until I got to the test case. All right, so this is basically it. It's a happy path test case. I'm going to run it. And you'll see, if you look over at this view, you can run it here, and you'll see that it passes, right? You get nice, happy green. Doesn't really tell me anything though, because I didn't assert anything. So this is where you really cross the line from exploring into testing and making sure that things meet requirements. And this is really something that SoapUI, I think, does really, really well and beautifully and easily. It comes packaged with a number of assertions. One of the things that we're going to start with is invalid HTTP codes, right? We want to make sure that we're not getting 404s, we're not getting 500 errors, that sort of thing. So, of course, SoapUI just walked up. There we go. So the invalid HTTP status codes. So 500, 400, 501, 503, 404, 401. Those are some pretty common, error codes.
Can you flip it so that it only looks for one code instead of making sure it's not a whole bunch of codes?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I'm about to show you that. So it's my screen in the box. And I think I have to kill SoapUI. Oh, there it goes. All right. So, assertions. This is my demo one. All right. So we've got that. We can also assert that it provides a valid code. In this case, it's 200 OK. Two versions of SoapUI. All right. Sorry, it appears to be around. Let's see if that does it. All right. Let me just restart, I think. This is awesome because it didn't lock up on me at all when I was doing the practice. here we go. Ooh, I don't think it saved my stuff. Alright, let's see if it saved it. Yes, it did. Alright, cool. So, back to where we were. So we're on our test step for getting the Chicago slalom address. Got our assertions, add another one for compliance, so we're gonna go to valid HTTP status codes. Right. Add 200. So if you want one, no need to include the comma, just provide that. And then we can run the test again to make sure it's verified. After you run the test once, if you add another assertion, it'll verify it on the fly. So another type of it, I mean, knowing the response code is nice and all, but you want sometimes to verify other things, like for example, response time. This is in milliseconds, so I want to verify that this responds in half a second, so I'm going to provide it with 500 milliseconds. I'm also going to add, let's see, let's do a property content one. So we'll do, and this is kind of where it gets cool. So you can just do a contains, right? And I can make sure that that it contains Stetson, right? Because we want that, we know we want that to appear in the response. Ignore the case, that's just generally good unless you care about case sensitivity. You can see that it contains that. You can also do not contain. So if you want to make sure that there is there are no errors, then you can go to not contains. That's a nice one that I like doing. I add this one to almost every single one because you very rarely want the word error to show up unless you're doing a negative test case. And then you can also use JSON path or XPath to verify that a piece of data made it over. So in this case, let's do, so you can do JSON path count. So this is great for testing pagination. So say you expect there to be 10 results of a certain data type, you can just make sure that you say, hey, expect 10 of these. I don't care what they are, just make sure there are 10. Not 11, not 9, just 10. You can also make sure that a field exists and that just the field shows up. You don't care about the data. You can also do a JSON path match, where you use JSON to basically travel through it to verify that a specific piece of data is there. I'm going to do that type. And I'm going to verify, let's look for the long name. The long name is going to be to Prudential. And then the cool thing is that you can also test this here. And if you're not great with JSON path or XPath, you can also select it from the current. Now this is one of the things that kind of makes Pro worth the price, because you can just right-click on something in the interface over here and be like, yeah, I want to add an assertion for this piece of data, right? So it's a couple of extra steps if you don't have the Pro version. So I'm just gonna, you can see these all passed. I'm just gonna run this again. All right, cool. Everything looks good here. Now, that's a nice happy path test. What happens if I don't provide an address? I should get an error. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clone this test step, because I pretty much want everything to be the same, except I'm going to rename this to no address error. All right? And you can see that you can move it around to different projects or whatever. This is also how you move test steps. It's not really clear. I had to go digging through the documents the first time I wanted to move a test case. But I'm not gonna move it. I'm just gonna copy it, say OK. So what I've done is I've created this test case. The address is there. I'm simply going to remove the address, right? If you look at my assertions, the assertions are all there as well. Now I'm going to play this, and now it's an invalid request. I got that. However, the only one that passed was my SLA, so I got a quick response. I want to keep that around. My error code was bad request, so that failed. I'm just going to delete that one. We want to make sure that the code is 401. Or is it 400 or 400? 401. It's 400. So change that to 400, and then you'll see, now it passes. Obviously, Stetson is not going to be in the response. We do want to make sure that the word error appears in the response because we expect that it's going to be an error. That passes. Now I'm just going to delete this one. Actually, we'll change this one to success. We don't want it to say success if it's an error, obviously. And then the JSON path, I'm just going to delete that one because I'm not going to try to verify a piece of data. All right. Now you can see, oops, add this as a test step. Probably should have added this as a test step. It's probably its own test case. So this is where I can go and move things out. So I can clone test step, and I can move it. Instead, target's test suite is the same test suite, but it's a new test case, so I'm going to create new. I'm going to rename it as to error because no address. There you go. So that's that. So you've got a happy path and a sad path. Now, the other thing that I wanted to bring to your attention is if we're doing this and we have something here, a lot of times you'll have APIs that say, hey, you know, for this, they rely on each other. You say, hey, grab this piece of data and then use it in a request later, right? So there's a step called a property transfer that makes this possible within SoapUI. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer this place ID. It's a GUID, right? So I might want to use this in other tests. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new test step within here. And you can see there's the property transfer test step. I'm going to say transfer place ID. Right. And so basically what we want to do is we want to create something that grabs place ID and stores as a project variable. All right. So here you can select where you want to grab the property from. I'm going to grab it from this test case. The property is contained in the response, and I'm going to again use JSON path. I'm going to use this JSON path to grab that, and then I want to put it in this project, the brown bag demo. Oh, I don't have a property. So what I've got to do is I've got to go back here, and I've got to create a custom property. So I'm going to call it place ID. I'm going to leave it blank. It automatically shows up over here, again, without having to rebuild or do anything. And just select the same language. Now I can test it out. It gives me the message that it transferred. It shows me the value that it transferred. And if I look over here, sure enough, it transferred that value. So if I wanted to refer to this variable in other test steps, I could.
So is this what you would do for authorization tokens, where you get the token and then use it in subsequent tests?
Yes, that's one way you can do it. There are other, so the kind of great thing about SoapUI is it's kind of like Photoshop or one of those other really huge applications, and that there are many, many different ways to do things. You could do that. You could write a Groovy script that stores it and calls it. There's a lot of different ways that you could do it. You could just set up, they have this whole auth thing where you can set it up in the auth at the beginning of a test, and then it just uses that. So it kind of depends on how you're going to use it. But yeah, that's definitely one of the ways you could do that. All right, so I have all those generated. I am going to do the same thing with this API. So I'm going to generate a test suite from this. You can see if I wanted to add them to the geocoding test suite, I could. I don't want to. I'm not going to generate a load test for this. This is going to be directions test suite. All right, so same thing here. Format test case. And basically, I would just have to go in here, add my assertions, run the test, and boom. All right, so I'm just going to add a simple assertion since I already demoed that for you guys. You know what to expect. Let's do contains prudential. All right. just so that we can see the test pass. So right now, we have a battery of tests against a couple of endpoints. So I can either go in there and kind of run them one at a time, which I showed you, but that's not really automated testing. What's really amazing is if you can go here, and this kind of gives you the overview of the project. Gives you a handy little test suites thing. You can see here are the 2 test suites that I generated, and all I have to do is push the button, and the entire thing is tested like quicker than I can finish a sentence. Think about how long it would take you to build those requests in something like Postman or Visual Studio or something like that. Play it. I just generated 3 test cases really quickly in the span of like 20 minutes to test an API. These are silly test cases. This is just basically to show you some of the features that are available. But yeah, that's pretty much it. It's really simple. Again, if you wanted to do some security scan stuff, you can set defaults there. This is a really huge, very easy to use tool. So that said, I think that's pretty much all I've got for you guys. Does anybody? You have a question?
Yeah. So how can you get these automated tests to run in your continuous integration pipeline?
Good question. So SmartBear publishes something called Test Runner. It's packaged. It's a command line tool that's packaged with SoapUI, and you just basically set up, your build process to run Test Runner, past a few parameters. I could totally do a presentation on that. That's like its own ball of wax, how you integrate with CI. But yeah, it also SoapUI also plays nicely with Docker. So if you wanted to create some Docker stuff for this, you could. Again, like if you wanted to look at the Swagger stuff is super cool. You just if you right click on something, this is one of the newer features. You can export Swagger, right? And just select this and just pick a place, and it'll, let's see, put it in my documents. Just put it on my desktop. Yeah, you can even select, the format or whatever. Most APIs are in JSON. It should just be sitting on my desktop. Yep, right there. Save your Swagger definition too, which is super cool. So, even if you don't have Swagger, if you have like an API doc and you work for a really buttoned up place that has things like a Waddle or a WSDL, then you can do that. So it's super, I'm honestly really surprised that a lot of people aren't using SoapUI more because it's super, super powerful, and it's more important to test APIs as, as time goes on and apps are more dependent on them. IoT stuff also heavily dependent on APIs. All right, cool. Anybody have any other questions? All right, my name's Elisha. I sit over on with the QA team over here, so come by, stop, say hi. I'm new here. I've only been here for about 2 months, so down for grabbing lunch or whatever. And if you guys have any questions about test automation, pretty much any kind of flavor of test automation, I'm probably your girl. All right, thank you.